Welcome to the Flower Essence Podcast, and join us on an exploration of the healing wisdom of flowers.
With combined decades of experience in the study and practice of flower essence therapy, I, Kathleen Aspens, and co-host Rokana Feld guide you to reconnect to nature with these potent vibrational remedies.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Flower Essence Podcast. And good morning, Kathleen. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing really well, thanks.
So today we're going to talk about focus. Focus meaning mental concentration, ways to help from getting distracted, especially when we're suffering from overwhelm or overstimulation. We want to look at things that can help us have the energy to finish projects or manifest our intentions and deal with some of the mental cloudiness and exhaustion that comes from the modern lifestyle. So is there anything that you want to start off with when we're talking about the subject of focus?
Yeah, I think focus is something that there's such a deficit of focus right now. We're so trained to be overstimulated and distracted all the time that I think that there's a piece of learning how to focus and sort of being in a calmer state is really useful to think about, emphasize, and build into your lifestyle. You know, I see people walking around and, every 30 seconds your phone chirps at you and wants to distract you from what you're doing. And the reality is that multitasking isn't real. No one can do it. And you're just simply distracted all the time. And I think that learning how to focus and release yourself of distractions and turning things off and being okay with that your phone didn't get checked every 30 seconds can be a really good aid to starting to deepen into whatever it is that you want to do, whether it's a creative activity or whether it's an intensive work project. Learning how to turn things off externally, and then now we can talk about some essences that can help you learn to turn things off internally, because those two things play into a lack of focus. Do you think?
I agree. And I really like what you say about multitasking. That's something that I have always done, I feel like. And, it really doesn't help get anything done faster. It's been shown that, both things that you're working on, you can do it with tasks that don't take a lot of mental energy. Of course, you could listen to a podcast while you're driving. I mean, that's multitasking because, you don't need all of your focus and concentration for listening to anything. But if you're trying to, work on a report and watch TV, that's you're doing yourself a disservice. And then what I've found and read more about with studies is that the more you do that, the more you're creating these pathways in your brain that are making it harder and harder to stay focused when you really do want to use that, to have some sort of deep focus time. So the flower essences alone, are, it's really some lifestyle choices that have to be incorporated with the flower essences to increase our ability to focus and to get out of that sort of cycle of the constant checking of the phone, like you say, and having our brain just go off in all these different directions constantly. The more we do it, it sort of perpetuates the problem getting worse and worse. And so we have to set aside time for deep focus work, and we have to be a little more aware of what we're doing when we are bouncing around from thing to thing, and maybe why we're doing it too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that on some level, learning to think deeply or engage deeply in anything, nowadays it's almost a practice. You really have to intentionally turn your phone away. Or, I mean, I'm pointing out the phone because that is the massive crack object of the 21st century, because it's just constantly desiring your attention. There's alerts and there's things that like pop up, and we're really wired, and it's built into the design of the system to sort of wire you for that little dopamine burst of, ooh, something exciting might be happening in the world or on your Facebook feed or whatever it might be. And to recognize, oh, this is actually really just trying to, trigger my buttons, and it's designed that way because that's how these systems pay for themselves.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's attention is advertising is attention now, and
Right.
dying to get your attention. So I
And
think
it's
there's a practice there.
absolutely. And it's called, gamification. It's a very well studied thing that's programmed into all of these apps and Facebook and social media that give us that dopamine rush and make us want to look at it more and more often, for sure.
Yeah. And that desire is that infinite scroll where you're just like, you could just do that all day long.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's the possibility that something interesting could happen. And yet it's just robbing your life on some levels, doing it in limited bursts for, to stay in touch with friends, wonderful, beautiful thing. But to just sort of keep just constantly hoping that they're going to get a little another dose of excitement is probably robbing a lot of your life.
Yeah, I really agree. And we didn't have this issue, 10 years ago, even, definitely before that. So, part of what I think we have to develop more in ourselves with this modern age is the discernment and the ability to prioritize where we put our attention and where we put our time. Um, so one of the flowers, I think, in general for focus and being disciplined in where we're putting our energy is the Media flower, Media elegans. I like the Alaskan flower essence for this, and it's really an interesting flower. Have you seen that one
I
in
think the
person?
media, I've used the Flower Essence Society. I think that you said the Alaskan,
Oh,
but I
I'm
don't think
sorry, not
Alaskan makes
Alaskan.
that one. Yeah.
You're
It's
right. You're
easy
right.
to get these mistaken, isn't
Yeah,
it?
not Alaskan.
Are we
I'm
focused?
kidding.
I don't know. But yeah,
Exactly. See, bouncing around between Alaskan and FES.
it's easy to do. Yeah, I think media is a valuable essence for that. And I think that that next piece, that bridge, like we were talking about the technology kind of constantly distracting us. I think that the best and most beautiful antidote for that is to engage with nature. Just literally observing a tree or observing the sky, it turns off those centers in your brain that are hyperstimulated, because you start to go into noticing, sensory noticing, and just watching, and it's not overstimulating. So literally just shifting your gaze, if you have a window to look at or a tree, watching it move in the breeze or whatever it might be, it can change that wiring and change you from that overstimulated that's not the word I'm looking for, but overstimulated, let's say, by technology into looking at nature. And so media, I think, is like the flower essence that offers that energetic of helping you focus down into awareness in your body, and then just sort of being in your environment. That's a really natural state.
Yeah. And what I found so interesting about that flower is that it closes during the daytime, during the hottest part of the afternoon, yet it's not a night pollinated flower. So most other flowers that do that are that open during the night and close during the day are because they're pollinated during the evening, but the media is not. It's pollinated during the day, and yet the reason why it closes during the afternoon is because it needs to protect itself from water loss, water evaporation. And so it is actually making a choice for what's more important, being pollinated or losing the water and wilting. And I find that really interesting from this evolutionary perspective with this flower. And don't know of any other flowers that really do that like that. And it actually completely closes up. The petals curl into each other, and so it looks going from a full bloom to like a small bud. And then after the late afternoon, it'll open back up again and be open all night and into the morning. And there's a neat video that you can see that with, on the Flower Essence Society website, uh, where there's a little plant study about that flower. So I think that has something to say about what we should be doing is, you know, figuring out what's the most important thing right now. You might have a whole lot of important things to do in a small window of time, and we have to get good at prioritizing so that we can do what is necessary right away. So I like to include that when that's part of the issue.
Very cool. I think that I know chicory also does that, where it closes during the heat of the day, but it doesn't reopen until the morning as far as I know. But that is a known thing that preserves during excess heat and during the hotter part of the day, and it just plants will open up and then be receptive in the cooler part of the day and then close down to preserve moisture, which is an interesting concept if you looked at it through a Chinese medicine lens, where what the plant is doing is preserving its yin. In the most yang part of the day, the heat, the dryness, it would lose its moisture, which is a yin quality, and so it withdraws and retracts into itself so that it doesn't over yang. And I think that that's an interesting notion for us to think about, because when we get overstimulated, when we get hot-headed, when we get burned out, that's too much yang. So we're doing
Uh-huh.
too much, it's excess yang, and preserving ourselves with the media, thinking about bringing in and down, centering into our bodies, that's preserving the yin qualities. The media helps to bring that yin down and in and keep you from being overstimulated by excess yang. So it's excess heat or any sort of overstimulation would be considered excess yang.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
I do think that if you're thinking about a combination formula that's very helpful for focus, I think the mindful combination from the Flower Essence Society, it's one of the pre-made formulas that kind of covers a lot of bases. And I think it contains media. It's a really effective sort of a first line where you can go and start taking that and using that as a combination formula to kind of help to resolve the overstimulation and help you to focus when you need to. So it's really useful to keep it on your desk and to sort of keep it nearby when you're trying to finish a project or a report or what have you.
Yeah. And do you use bunchberry? I like that one, but now that's the one by Alaskan that I was,
Yeah.
yeah, thinking about.
Yeah, I like it. I think maybe I haven't used it as much as you, so I'd like to hear what you talk about when you use Bunchberry.
Yeah, well, it's a more recent discovery of mine, but I'm really, interested and excited about this flower. It is in the dogwood family, but it's not a tree. I think it's a low growing bush. And what is so interesting about it and using it in a focus formula is that it's the fastest flower in the world considered. So it shoots out its pollen like in an explosion that, I have in my notes here that they've done tests of the petals, and it's just a tiny little white unassuming four petaled flower. It can move at 22 feet per second when they open with explosive force. Um, there's videos, there's all these videos that you can look at that where the pollen is ejecting, and it's like, one of those slow motion bullets coming out of a gun kind of thing. And they liken to that it's faster than like a bullet moving through a rifle, in how fast. So that is such a focused concentration. If you can you imagine like what that flower is, all of that concentrated force, to release its pollen, of course, so that it gets into the air, um, for it, and gets dispersed. It's really interesting. They liken it to, those, medieval trebuchets or catapults and
Oh,
so forth. And yeah, another little stat is ejected 10 times the height of the plant. Um, yeah, very, very interesting. But so anyway, for Alaskan, they talk about it as being used when there's lack of mental focus, or if you're easily distracted or caught up in emotional and mental turmoil and not having enough time to complete tasks. So
hmm.
that kind of will help just get your brain on the track of, what's the word I'm looking for? Executing your tasks.
Ah, there we
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
that can be really a trick because you can really get wrapped up into the thinking cycle and the like rumination cycle and not actually be able to make that leap. And I
Yeah.
think that may be that bunchberry piece of helping you to release that focused energy into the action, in taking the action.
Yeah. So pretty
Cool.
fun.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to think about when somebody tells me that they are not focused or that they have trouble focusing is I want to know why. Because it might be that there's just sort of poor hygiene in that term, like never turning your phone off or never putting yourself in a place where you're not distracted. And that can be a really useful thing to learn those skills of, okay, this is not a good study habit for you to have the TV on while you're trying to, do this piece. But I think also one of the things that can be a piece of the lack of focus can be that you're kind of worried. Your system is always running. You've always got a cycle going on. It's a little bit like with a computer with the rainbow wheel of death. Nothing really works very well when you've got a huge program running in the background. And I think worry can be one of those things. If you just kind of feel generally anxious and worried all the time, that can really suck a lot of your life force. And I think that white chestnut would be one of my first go-tos for that. That's one of
Hmm.
the Bach essences.
Yeah.
And is white chestnut something you've worked with quite a bit,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah. A little bit. I also like other grounding essences when that's the case. So we've talked in episodes before about the trees. And so, a lot of the different tree essences are great for that feeling of grounding and, getting back to your roots and getting off the hamster wheel. That would be specific. There's so many that are nice for that, with redwood and oak and so forth.
Yeah, I think we keep talking about grounding because I think it's a really big issue. It's definitely a sign of the times that we are so distracted and so up in our heads all the time that we aren't grounded. And it's just part of the process of starting to get back in your body and start to get more grounded that you'll feel less anxious, less overwhelmed, and less unfocused or more focused, let's say.
Yeah, right.
Double negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that helping anything that helps you sort of get into your body and to get sort of into your center is a good essence for you. I think about clematis too. I think clematis can be a really useful essence, and that's one of the Bach essences. Clematis is really helpful for sort of bringing in all of those diffuse mental forces of sort of that dreaminess, and it's just inherently unfocused, helping it kind of come back into your body and make a decision about particular things that you need to do and actually be able to execute them.
Lovely. I like working with lotus as well, to just kind of center and, um, in a more calm way, get clear on what's needed. And I like both the traditional lotus, the sacred lotus, and I use the FES one for that. And that just sort of helps uh, get onto the spiritual side and synthesize what's going on in the with life experience, and bring it in to get clear on things. But I also really like the blue lotus, that's technically a water lily, and I have a lovely version of that from Flora Corona. I I almost look at it as like an adaptogenic in the way that it can have this calming euphoria on one aspect, but be mildly stimulating in another. And that's the herbal action when that plant is used herbally. So it's interesting that the flower essence kind of um, just I don't know. Deborah Creighton of Flora Corona says, it gives your body a feeling of cellular effervescence that permeates your skin and uplifts your spirit. And I just really love that. And so that's kind of bringing back um, sort of an energetic focus to the self, to the physical body, the energetic body. And, I think providing a lot of alignment that can help in conjunction with some of these other more concentrated focus essences to become a nice blend.
So interesting. I'm just thinking of the water lilies and how they grow, obviously submerged in water, and then their flowers and leaves are up on the surface. So they have that really interesting quality of balancing fire and water.
Yeah.
Right? They get no shade, they get no protection from the direct sunlight. And anybody who spent time on a boat or by the water realizes how intense the sun can be. It's almost like you're getting twice the amount of sunlight, right? You get burned crazy. People
Yeah.
like us get burned really badly when we're near the water. So if you think about what water lilies and even the
And the
lotus
lotus. Yeah.
do, is they're balancing those two pieces. So that's really interesting what you're saying about the blue lotus sort of having that balancing quality.
Yeah, and while you were talking, I was just thinking, there's a Thich Nhat Hanh book called "No Mud, No Lotus," and or I think that might be just a classic saying, um, in that the those lotuses and the water lilies, they don't grow without mud, and so there's a lot of deep um, contemplation that can be had with that saying. But I'm just, yeah, I hadn't thought about it in the way that you're talking about it, with that balancing act of the sun, the heat, the cooling aspect, balancing the part that's exposed and in the sun. I like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it is, I mean, to me, it always feels like when I'm overstimulated, it feels like I've got, it's like a type of heat stroke
Too much
almost.
heat.
You're just
Absolutely.
overwhelmed.
Yep.
There's just so much energy firing at you, and voices or overstimulation or electronics, and it feels like heat to me. It feels like that energetic of heat, and that would be how you would describe it, from a Chinese medicine perspective. And so these essences that have these qualities of being able to manage that, I think, are an interesting element to add into any formula that where you're looking for help with that focus from that angle of sort of being overstimulated.
Yeah, that's so interesting too, how it kind of aligns with how media is preserving and managing its water evaporation, and then so with the lotuses, I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I think that is there another piece sort of along this line that we're talking about, that sort of balancing quality? I think that one that I'm thinking about is tea,
Mm.
the flower essence of the tea plant of, green tea fame, or actually black tea. It's all the same tea plant, that makes all true teas. But the flower essence of tea is one that is in my Flora of Asia line, and I find it to really help you sort of bring everything back into the center. Green tea is inherently cooling in the medicine sense. And I think
Mm.
tea essence helps to sort of cool and calm and ground and help you sort of create this bubble of focus around you where you're not overstimulated as much.
Yeah, that is so interesting, that cooling, calming, yet like mentally stimulating action of tea
Right.
translates there into the flower essence. And do you I have you worked with the camellia or camellia, um, the garden one, not the green tea one. I can't
Right. Well,
speak.
we're talking in the same family,
Yeah.
in the family Taceae, which contains the camellias,
Hmm.
and the Camellia sinensis is the green tea, and
Right.
there's a number of different camellias that we think of as camellias. So we
Yeah.
have Camellia japonica, which
That's
is
the one.
kind of the classic garden camellia, where it might have red or white or pink flowers. I've worked with the Camellia japonica, which has a red flower. The species has a red flower, and I found it to be really helpful for focus as well. I mean, it really draws in all your energies into a direct area of focus. So I think that when you look at plants essences from a family capacity, you're really working with the qualities of an overarching sort of the TACA have all of those qualities, and each one has a different facet of those qualities.
That is true. And that japonica, that's the one that's typically grown in gardens. And it's such a beautiful flower. What most people don't know, it is tea leaves, and you can ferment them and drink them as tea. I don't think it's as caffeinated, but uh, it does
The
have that
caffeine
same.
what comes the caffeine levels in tea, in Camellia sinensis tea, come from the fermentation
Yeah.
or the drying processes. So there can be more or less depending on the way that they're processed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever really heard of anybody using Camellia japonica, but I'm sure it's not toxic. It just may not be as great of a tea. But yeah,
Right. Right. Yeah. But
yeah,
it's
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 interesting.
it's edible. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I don't see why it wouldn't be. Yeah,
And
and the
caffeinated.
anything for a buzz, right? Yeah, I think that the next piece is sort of when you've gone further down that road of towards that exhaustion, when you've been overstimulated for a period of time and sort of crossed that barrier, then you might be thinking more into, like, I think nasturtium might
Yeah.
be a good choice for when you've really burned yourself a little too far.
What's interesting, I'm thinking, is that's a plant that's really kind of watery, full of water as well. When you break off the stems, there's a lot of water going on in that plant. Um, what I also really like about nasturtium, what's so interesting about the plant form, is if you look under those kind of wide, round leaves that it has, uh, there's the way it grows is this just total connected network of stems. It reminds me of sort of a neural pathways. It's kind of like all over and in and around, and it's a very extensive kind of complex network, the way that the stems grow. And that makes me think of the ways that it can help connection in the brain and add to creative intelligence. Maybe giving it's spicy. It's a very spicy, edible plant. You can put it in your salads. And so it has that sort of energy that I liken to a flash, like a flash of insight. Um, so it's cooling, it's calming to that dry state of intellectual burnout, but I think it can really help with studying and making new connections when you're feeling burned out so that you can keep working intellectually.
That's so interesting. Right. I've grown it in the past, and I remember if you sort of look under that tile work almost of the leaves, like you're describing, of these beautiful circular leaves that form these quite cool patterns, and then the flowers pop up above. But if you peek underneath there, it is quite a tangle.
Yeah.
It's not an organized plant in any stretch of the imagination. So it's interesting to think about it in that signature of that sort of neural network that forms, where it has, I think it has a lot of redundancy built into it, right? It's
Yeah.
not just a stem and then it tangles out and then has foliage. It seems to really have a lot of built-in ability to adapt to different, because it'll go over a wall, it'll go
Mhm.
between plants, it has that adaptability. And I think that that's interesting part of the signature that you can address to this focus issue, because it helps you adapt to whatever is going on and to find that focus within that.
Yeah, and also part of the signature, the little buds, which are capers, and you can actually um, pickle them and eat. They're a yummy little thing you could add to your salads. Is taking the little flower buds and pickle them in vinegar, and they kind of look like little brains. They're round, but they have the little kind of bumpiness to it, and they remind me of little brains. So it's that signature repeated.
Oh, how funny. Yeah. So they're not true capers, but they can be treated in the same way
Yeah,
as caper flowers. How
yeah,
interesting. And then the little seeds are huge. I mean,
yeah.
they're not little seeds, they're huge
They're
seeds
big.
comparative to the plant. And they have that wrinkly little, they almost look like little BBs, but really wrinkled.
Yeah,
That's yeah, it's so fun to really get to know plants
yeah,
rather than just sort of have, one experience of them where you just saw a picture and then maybe what it's about in the sense of a remedy or an essence, but to really, it's such a useful practice to grow the plants and to live with them and to find out about them on deeper levels, and it gives you more and more insight. So thanks for your insights on nasturtium.
yeah, yeah. And that's so true. That's why when there's a plant or a flower that I haven't grown or I haven't observed in the wild, like the media, I it's helpful to do research, and I was thankful that there was a flower study on the Flower Essence Society site that talked more about its growing pattern and reiterated the importance of getting to know a flower or a plant through its life cycle, because you just really can't get to know it by a static picture that's one moment in time.
I agree. And the Flower Essence Society has been a really wonderful resource for the community for decades now of really solid research and really intentional focus on learning about these essences and learning about their qualities. And like you were saying, the website is a great resource for finding out more information. I think there's quite a bit more behind their membership wall is not the right word, but it's true. To pay a little bit for an annual membership is really valuable because you're supporting their work, but you're also getting access to some really great content on the back end there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and Alaskan Essences also has some free downloadable resources as well. So those are great.
And don't forget the living book. The Alaskan Essences living book is amazing. It's a very modest amount to pay. That's, I think, pretty sure a lifetime membership, and you are able to get onto the living book website where you can find out a lot of information about them. And it's got a really good repertory system where you can look up issues or
Yeah,
look up qualities and be able to get really good information and images as well.
exactly.
Yeah, so yay, resources. And I think the easy learning is the next step, right? Where we were talking a little about what might help with these qualities, and the Alaskan Essences formula easy learning. And I'm pretty sure it has bunchberry in it, is a
Right.
wonderful, easy to find, easy to get formula to help with the mental processing. And I think that's really the biggest thing is that when you've decided you want to learn something new or try something new, to be able to help yourself organize that information and be able to access it in a better way. Do you recommend easy learning for
Yeah.
people going back to school?
That's a nice off the shelf one to grab for going back to school and doing any kind of studying. I really like that. They have the regular internal drop dose formula, but also a spray that has some essential oils in it. And it's got a nice spicy scent with coriander as one of the notes, and rosemary, of course. So it's really bright. And I do like that kind of spicy but not overwhelming scent that it has.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that using a spray can be a really great way to sort of regain focus as you're trying to work through a project. Just kind of keeping a spray on hand or nearby and giving yourself a little mist on a regular basis can help you retain focus and move through your project.
Yeah, because we just constantly have to reset, reframe, realign, because of always being pulled in all these directions. So any little thing that can just kind of help snap out of it or snap back into place. And an essential oil or a scent is a great way to just immediately do that and get that sort of immediate feedback in the brain that, okay, now we're going to go back to reading this paper or
Right.
writing this thing or whatever it is.
Yeah, that ability to refocus, because it's
Right.
focus and then refocus and
Refocus.
then
Yeah.
refocus and then refocus again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a process that you're continually having to
Right.
intend to focus on something. And how do you feel about that sort of the ending stage of where sometimes we can get stuck at the very end and not be able to complete?
Yeah, well, the jacaranda comes to mind. That's another one that's a little bit newer to me, but it's another one of Flora Coronas that I have. And boy, that tree is beautiful. It's just that beautiful purple flower tree that I've never met. I mean, I don't think it grows around here. It needs a non-frost, warmer environment. There's no kind of jacaranda at the Quarry Hill Botanical Gardens, is there? No.
No, jacaranda requires a frost-free
Yeah.
environment or near
Yeah.
to.
Right.
It grows really well in Southern California, and I remember growing up, there's some streets in Pasadena area where jacarandas are the street tree, and when you go there in June and everything is just this purple bath. It's so beautiful. It's just overwhelmingly beautiful, and the jacaranda is just a gift at that time of year, just to be able to drive under that and to sort of experience it's like this pale lilac purple color
Yeah.
that's covering the sky.
It's
I love jacarandas.
it's kind of like my dream tree. I've never met it, but it's like, oh my gosh, just looking at the pictures online is incredible. I just love the way that tree looks in bloom.
Yeah.
And the
I
one
think
that
they're from South America.
yeah, exactly. And the one I have, Deborah made it in Hawaii, but it's also very common in Australia. And I was reading some interesting folklore about it in Australia. They call purple panic is the term that they use for student stress during exam times in when it blooms late spring and early summer in Queensland, Australia. So the purple refers to those trees that have been planted all throughout that district. And the panic, of course, is because students are panicking about completing their assignments and studying for their final exams.
Wow,
So
that's interesting.
isn't that amazing? I was really shocked to learn this. And the thing that's really interesting is there's a little legend that at the University of Pretoria, that if a flower from the jacaranda tree drops on a student's head, the student will pass all their exams.
That's cool. And you just wait until that happens. You can stand under the tree and make it happen.
That tree.
Because there's no problem. You will eventually get dropped on with a flower on top of your head. So that's good. So that's a focus. You can inwardly focus on your intention that a jacaranda flower will fall in your head.
But it is as a flower essence, it is known to give energy to finished projects and realize intentions. I just find it so fun to find folklore that matches up with what the flower essences do. I love it.
That is fascinating. I hadn't ever heard that that story, which is really fun. But yes, I have wonderful positive associations with jacaranda, and look forward to trying the Flora Corona version. I haven't run across that yet, so that's quite cool.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I think of for that sort of keeping the energy going until you're complete is hibiscus pollen. From Jane Bell's Hawaiian Essences. And that has this sort of potentizing quality that helps you to build that level of energy and really be able to push when you need to push. But it's because it's a hibiscus, it has sort of a balancing quality, I think, inherent to it, that it helps you keep from overdoing, but it's just enough to be able to get done.
What just came to my mind just now is that, hibiscus is used as a tea for being overheated, for staying cool. So again, we have this theme of cooling, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, the hibiscus that Jane made for the pollen essence was from a white flowered hibiscus,
Hmm.
and so it has even cooler than the red, right? But it's
Ah,
interesting because the jamaica, the hibiscus drink, those are little red hibiscuses, and they're not. They're a different species that has little red flowers, which is really cool. And I love the beverage. It's quite delicious if you've ever
hmm,
had it. Yeah.
yeah.
But the hibiscus that Jane used to make her essence is a white flowered one, but it's the pollen, and the pollen is like an orangey red. So the bowl was just covered in these little orangey red pollen granules, and it just had that sort of. It was like a fire in a cool place.
Oh, how interesting. With all of this theme about cooling, we know that the brain works better and thinks better when you're not overheated, like with you're thinking about, like, say you're working in an office or studying in a library, when the temperature is cooler, it's a lot more conducive to mental processes.
I mean, it makes sense. Even if
Yeah,
you're thinking in a strictly practical manner or in a mechanical manner of like your computer works better when it stays cool, right?
totally.
When your computer's overheated, it can't really run well and it'll seize up on you. So if your brain, if you think about it in that way, which I think it's much more than that, but it's true. When it's cooler, it is easier to think.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one, I think, we haven't talked about any gem essences. And I don't want to end the episode without talking about fluorite because it's such a great one for mental clarity and helping that prioritization process and just really clearing any congestion in the entire kind of seventh chakra head area to begin with. I the regular fluorite by Alaskan is the purple fluorite, and I do like that purple fluorite for increasing focus. But also, they make a combo that has a couple different colors, and I think that would be, it's kind of the same as a rainbow fluorite, which really aligns all the chakras and kind of brings it all together in alignment. What do you think
Interesting.
about that?
Yeah, I think a fluorite is a really good option. The one that comes to my mind first is aquamarine.
Mm.
I really like aquamarine, another one of the Alaskan gem essences for that
That
cooling
cooling, yeah.
quality.
The light bulb, that cooling light bulb keeps going off.
Exactly. If you just, I mean, even just thinking about the gem, how beautiful, cool blue it is. It has almost that glacier color. And I think that aquamarine, as the energetic of it in the essence, really does, booster this quality that we're looking for, where you're cooling and calming. So I think that that's a good option.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Any other gems that you like to use?
Yeah, I mean, I'm even thinking more, because I'm thinking about the essences we've talked about so far. So we've talked about a number of the different flowers that can help with sort of bringing your focus in, cooling it and bringing it down, and then with the gems helping to anchor that energetic of inward and downward and cooling. And then I'm even thinking about some essences that are maybe some environmental essences that help
Mm-hmm.
with that cooling. So that would be the next piece that I'd be thinking of.
Yeah.
And just in that cooling energetic, I think about stone circle, which is one of the Alaskan environmental essences, because just in general, Alaska, you're going to be thinking it's going to be generally cooler, although this summer has been a different sort of situation. But stone circle has these incredible, they're large stones that are naturally arranged in a circle. It's this sort of magical little location that Steve Johnson found, and I really think about it as being that grounding. So it emphasizes that quality of coming inward and downward and cooling, and bringing it all the way into the ground. So that would be the piece that I would think of next as sort of adding into this mix of focusing energy.
the environmental essences are so neat. And there's a few that are glacier specific, which would also have that cooling energetic. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that like Greenland ice cap has that quality of sort of mental silence so that you can listen to what's under really deep. What processes are going on so deep that are above the level of conscious awareness. It can help to sort of silence the chatter and the noise and the stimulation so that you can really go inward and listen to what is being called for.
Any others that you want to talk about?
Those are the ones that I felt the most compelled to share. I think that if I were to have sort of an essence that might help, one more little piece. I really love Serato for this topic of. I think that once again, we're talking the flower is that blue color, that sky blue color, and helps to bring in your intention and helps to bring in your quality of inspiration. The Serato helps to connect to your higher self and bring all of your energies together so that you can take the right action. The Serato, when it's out of balance, that essence state out of balance, is somebody who's constantly looking around and asking advice and asking the authorities of all, and they can never come to a place of being, okay, now I know what's the right action to take. So Serato can help you find that center of yourself and that wisdom that resides in your heart and in your base, and be able to listen to that wisdom and take action based on that wisdom.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And that is what we're striving for, is with flower essence therapy, really, is getting back to ourself and learning how to listen to ourselves, being able to observe ourselves, understanding where it is we want to go, but not forcing it from an external way, not being hit over the head with a hammer with a pharmaceutical, or we're working not just with our body but with our spirit and bringing those all into alignment. And it's a beautiful feeling, to what you just described, being able to just go within and be centered and find that place that you can come from as you go out into the world. So I do love the way that you described that.
And I want to give a big woohoo to everything you just said, because I'm completely in alignment with that. I think that it's so beautiful when you get connection with who you are and you stop reacting to the world so much. You stop having to sort of feel the need to perform or to be, you're constantly being triggered, but to be able to have that level of clarity. And it's not a clarity like a top down clarity. It's almost a bottom up clarity where you just really get rooted into yourself and you get really clear on who you are.
Or even middle out from the heart.
Yes.
It's kind of like you're just, right there in the center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, what a beautiful image. Thank you for getting that going. That was wonderful.
Oh, good. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up, unless there was anything else.
Nope, I'm in agreement. I think that this was a nice touch in on this topic of focus. And, we'd love to hear from our audience. Please feel free to comment on the Facebook or Instagram posts. We'd really love your feedback on the help that you found from the essences, or what you have to say when you hear what we have to say. We love to share and collaborate and be part of the community. We feel so drawn to sharing this information with the world because we're just so in love with nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ditto to all of that. It's a labor of love, as I like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
all right.
Love to you, and we'll talk next time.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Flower Essence Podcast with Urkana Feld and Kathleen Aspens, and we appreciate your interest in connecting with nature on a deeper level. You can find us online at thefloweressencepodcast.com or join us on Facebook and continue the discussion.
This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. We are not physicians and do not diagnose, prescribe, or treat medical conditions. Please consult with your own physician or healthcare practitioner regarding the suggestions and recommendations made by the hosts and guests of the Flower Essence podcast.